As I lay here bleeding out, I'll never forget the night I spent drinking at the Twilight bar. The beer didn't get you drunk, but half the time we weren't drinking beer anyway. Sometimes we were drinking our pain. None of us knew it until it was too late, and it claimed us. On my way back home from a business meeting, I hitched a ride with a local taxi in New York. My wife was waiting on me back home in New Jersey, and I was eager to get home. The week was long, and I had grown quite tired of presenting data on the latest phone design for our company. I don't understand how so many executives find interest in camera pixels, but alas, that is the purpose of my job. I hailed a taxi from the side of the road next to the convention center in which I presented from. A few minutes later, a man named Ahmed pulled over in a bright orange taxi to pick me up. "Hello, sir," he said with a thick Arabian accent. "Hello back," I responded as he opened the passenger door to me. The taxi was quite clean and smelled of wintergreen mint. The driver was full of pleasant conversation and local trivia as well, but rather than converse on the local scenery with my newfound friend, I had the nagging feeling that I should call my wife Jenny. I punched in her phone number and hit the green dial button. It rang 3 times. "Hey, honey." She picked up. "Hey, baby." "What's up? You gonna be home soon?" I smiled because I knew exactly what she would ask before it left her lips. "Not soon enough, honey, but I'm coming. Keep the bed warm for me." "I love you, dear." "I love you too." A large blast of light filled the taxi, and Ahmed screamed and swore in some foreign language. "Geez, Ahmed, what happened?" I yelled as my phone clattered to the floor and we hit the side of a lamp post. "Bright light made me hit something." "You got a car service on dial or something?" I asked him. Ahmed pulled away from the light post to the side of the road next to a bar called the Twilight. "Get out," he said. "I'm going to call a curbside service." I obliged and took a look at the damage. Both back tires were in shreds and a large laceration graced the side of the taxi, as though some beast with massive claws jettisoned through it. "What the hell happened?" I hollered back at Ahmed. "Don't know, sir. Don't know. Go grab drink inside that bar while you wait. I fear this may take a while." "Don't have to tell me twice," I muttered, as I buttoned my pea coat and headed through the thick oaken doors to the Twilight bar. I planned to grab a nice pint and call my wife back to let her know what happened. The bar was adorned with Greco-Roman architecture and looked as if it were from a forgotten age, yet repurposed for a pub-style eatery. I could see several people inside. I gripped the glossy pearl handles to the heavy oaken door and walked inside. Inside the bar, there were 7 people, each ingrained in their own business just as I was. Seeing as how there were no tables available, I took a seat next to some gruff-looking man at the bar who was wearing a beret. "A light ale," I told the bartender. "Coming right up. I have just the thing for you," the bartender replied in an almost recognizable voice. Sure enough, as the bartender turned around with my ale, I recognized him as my old college friend, James. We spent many a pint together back in business school, but unfortunately the friendship died down over the time that I moved out of town, and he went for his master's degree. He was from a prominent family full of much academic pressure, so I wouldn't have been surprised if he got his PhD at this point. "James?" I said to him, trying to contain my excitement. He responded in kind. "Brian? Long time no see. Sorry it had to be in this joint, eh?" "Oh, nonsense, James. This place is quite nice." And really, it was. The perfectly stained bar top was exquisite, and the tables matched perfectly with an almost industrial flair. There was a fantastic fireplace behind James with a beautiful hand-carved shotgun on the fireplace mantel. The only thing holding the joint back was the clientele. "Say, quite the crowd you have here," I say. James furrowed his brow. "Well," he pointed to a woman with a cleft palate in the back of the room, "that there is Jennifer. She has a thing for alligators. I mean, she really likes alligators." I chuckled, not understanding quite what he meant, but he continued. "Next to her is Claudette, 3-time cancer survivor. She's waiting on another test to determine if it has come back or not." I raised a toast to her, and she returned the favor. To your health, ma'am, I said, and swallowed 2 massive gulps of beer. Continuing further, he pointed to a man with red stains on his beard in the back of the room. The man was polishing a wooden figurine and straightening any blemishes on the figurine with a large hunting knife. That there is Bryce, a star hunter from Alaska. His last find was a large bear. Kodiak, was it? James shouted towards the bearded man. Oh, yes, Bryce responded. Big old mother he was. I'm still fighting him in multiple ways. James chuckled. I wasn't sure what he meant, but he continued to introduce the clients. Then there's Jensen. I've forgotten what his vice is. What do you do now, Jensen? Jensen took a heavy swig of vodka and shouted, Gambling. Honest work, James replied with a hearty laugh as he took a sip of some liquid that seemed rather thick and gravelly. Let's see, that leaves, well, myself, Adam, and Jessie. Jessie is the woman by the window. She's on her, 8th pint. And then there's Adam right next to you at the bar. Adam made a cheers gesture with his mug. How do you do, traveler? I laughed and said, just fine. Adam seemed to be a cheery fellow. What do you do, Adam? Oh, I'm a sailor. I'm just taking a break before we go back to crab fishing. How about yourself? Oh, I'm a marketing executive on my way back to New Jersey. Nice work, that is. Sure beats the ocean. Well, I began, any work is good work. To that, Adam cheered and glugged a massive sip of beer. Then I saw James staring at me. He held a bright smile, but painful eyes. Enjoying your beverage? He asked me. Of course, James. Say, are you all right? Sure, just been dealing with some personal issues. Depression, mainly. I was a little struck back. Normally, I wouldn't expect a friend I hadn't seen in ages to jump so deep into a rather depressing issue in conversation, but considering he was once a marketing major himself and he had resorted to bartending, he had to have gone through something. Well, if you want to talk about it, James, feel free to. Funny you should say, because it'd be really nice to talk about... He was cut off. A bright light appeared from the kitchen door behind the bar. I could hear moaning coming from it. Moaning from someone in pain. I dropped my beer and it crashed to the counter and spilt everywhere. Funny enough, nobody bothered to help clean it. Not even James. Did you not hear that, James? The moaning grew even louder. James looked at me puzzled. I guess you heard something then. Well, that's a good sign. That's good? The moaning grew louder, but nobody seemed to care. It almost sounded like someone dying from the back room. I looked at Adam. Hey, fisherman, I said. Do you not hear that from the back kitchen? Adam perked up and listened hard. I hear a strong silence. It's almost too silent. Muffled, actually, he said. I don't like how it makes me feel. His skin began to look wet with sweat. Something felt horribly wrong. I went to the exit door and grasped the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Nobody seemed to care to help me. I checked my phone, begging to call my wife, but no signal was there. Any sign of Ahmed outside fixing the tire was gone. He either left me or I didn't know. You should come back to the bar, James said. You have a better chance than most. He stood there smiling, yet still in some form of pain. Please come back, I really want to help, James called. I grimaced, walking towards the bar. Get me another beer then, because I'm freaked the heck out right now. Make it an IPA. I need something a little stronger this time. Sit, Brian, please. I did, and he poured a beer for me. It was darker than the last one. I chugged the beer down to the bottom of the glass, only to find out that as I sat it down, it was once again full. You need to pay attention now. You have multiple choices here, but only 2 outcomes, James said. And what does that mean? I replied. I'm not at liberty to say. Right then, Adam threw up all over the bar, splattering water all over my pants and my beer. Jeez, sorry, friend. I seem to have gotten sickly there. You okay? I ignored him. If I actually acknowledged the vomit, I may have vomited myself. Take a moment, Brian, and listen, James said. I did. I heard the back room filled with moans and painful groans, but I also heard something else. I heard a guttural roar from behind me. What the hell was that? I yelled. That, my friend, is the creature of the Twilight, James said with a smile. In time, it comes for everyone in the bar, so make your decision wisely. My decision? I screamed. My decision is to leave here and get as far from this place as possible. I'm afraid that's impossible now. So sorry. Very sorry, but there's a reason we are all here. See Claudette, for example. I looked back at Claudette. She seemed so happy and calm, as though the whole world was built for her. Then in an instant, her skin began to turn black as coal. The once cancer survivor screamed, grasping at the folds of flesh that began to peel from her body. Then a massive tentacle from the darkness of the back of the room reached and pulled her into it. A splash of blood shot out to the chair she once sat in. I was stunned. I had no idea where she had gone or what had taken her. What did you do to her? I screamed at James. What is this place? James smirked and frowned. I did nothing that wasn't already going to happen. The Twilight Bar is not the place to be in, Brian. It is not the place to be. You must focus on your decision soon. At that point, Adam threw up another splash of clear liquid all over the bar. Oi, Adam said. I'm not okay right now. I'm not even thirsty anymore. Do you have any antacids, Jeremy? He asked James. I grabbed him a towel and helped him clean up. His name is James, you know, I said to Adam. Thanks, lad, he remarked, but I would know my old friend Jeremy anywhere. I looked back at James, ignoring the increasing screams of pain from the kitchen behind the bar. James shrugged. I guess he has me confused with someone else. James, please unlock the front door. I need to leave, I begged him. James slammed a glass on the counter. Don't you get it, Brian? You can't leave until you've made your choice. You can't, so make it. What choice? I screamed back at him, almost so loud that I could have missed the scream from behind me. Jennifer, the woman with the cleft palate's abdomen, turned bright red and poured pools of blood. Two massive jaws gripped around her waistline as her spine cracked and popped until she looked like a broken Barbie doll. Help me, she muttered, and I would have helped her, but the thing in the bar tore her body from the bar stool and into the darkness where a pool of blood flowed from. James! James! What is in here with us? What is in here with us? I pleaded as Adam threw up another gallon of water. The thing that comes for the broken. Don't worry, Brian. It's painless. It's all part of the experience at the Twilight Bar. Painless, huh? I asked, as James glared at me with those deep blue eyes. Jennifer pleaded for our help, James. She was bleeding, and you say it was painless. James drank again from his glass of dark granules. The minute before you go, there is no pain. What the... Before I could finish, Adam shouted at the back room where the light was coming from. Can't you help me, gents? Please, help me. I looked at what Adam was drinking now. It was water, but for some reason it was cloudy. I could see bits of vegetation inside it. That then is where the beast showed itself. I wouldn't have noticed if it weren't for James pointing at it. Take a look, Brian, please, he said. Behind me in the middle of the bar stood a beast. It stood on two legs. It had hooved feet and bent legs like that of a bird. Feathers covered its rotund body all the way up to the head, which was showered with thorns and horns and blood. Its mouth was that of a gargantuan human. It opened wide, showing a display of thousands of rows of dull teeth. Its tongue made a come-hither motion. It had tentacles for arms and black sludge for sweat. James, I shouted. Nobody else in the bar moved except for Bryce, the star hunter from Alaska. He stood up. Quite the find, if I do say so myself, Bryce shouted as he faced the creature with his large knife. James shouted towards Bryce, "I wouldn't do that if I were you." "Aw, shut up, Lucas," Bryce yelled to James as he pulled out a large revolver with his other hand. "For glory and nothing else." I would say that Bryce made a dent in the creature, but the gory mess that followed will haunt me to this day. Bryce was devoured. Blood and sinew flopped onto the ground from the creature's mouth as the poor man screamed for mercy. He fought hard, but every strike made the beast more vigilant and more angry. In mere moments, all that remained of Bryce was a skeleton. "I told him not to," said James. The monster then took Bryce's seat and watched the rest of the bar. "Make your choice, Brian." "I don't know what that choice is," I shouted, as the moans in the back room became stronger, louder, and more terrifying. Adam threw up again. This time he was more out of breath, gasping for air. He chugged down a full glass of the polluted water, only to find that it had refilled. The beast glared at Adam as its next prey. I thought fast and dove over the counter to grab the shotgun. "Oh, so that is your choice?" asked James. I ignored him, pulled the gun down, and aimed it at the beast. It didn't even move. It just glared at me with beady eyes and an unhuman smile. "Word of advice," James began. "Don't provoke it. The beast is rather hard to kill." Right then, Adam fell over dead, gasping for air. His eyes bulged like a frog before his belly protruded and tore open, spilling water everywhere. Then the beast approached, sending massive thuds against the floorboards. I aimed the shotgun at the beast, hoping to keep it away, but it ignored me. It grabbed Adam's body by the foot and slowly drug it away. "Hey, scrotum face!" I shouted at it, even though its face hardly looked like a scrotum. "Put the guy down!" The beast looked back at me, smiled, and kept moving. I hesitated, then put the gun down. For now, the monster was going, leaving me at the bar with James alone. James took a sip from his glass. It clinked as though gravel were inside. "Me, you, Jensen, and Jesse." Jensen and Jesse took the 2 remaining seats at the bar. Jensen held a glass full of dollar bills and coins, while Jesse's was filled with vodka and bile. They toasted each other and kept drinking. All the while, the noises from the back room became louder. "Say, Jensen, Jesse, what do you hear from the back room?" I asked them. Jensen chuckled. "I don't hear anything, but I smell lots of gunpowder." Jesse also chuckled and then sobbed. "I hear my son." The room grew quiet, all eyes on Jesse. My heart pounded. The secret of the Twilight bar began to reveal itself to me. I knew somehow what was next. Despite having never spent time at this bar, in my few hours here, I knew it was her turn. "Don't look behind you," James said. "Thanks, Anthony," Jesse responded to James. "Have you made your choice, Jesse?" "I think so." She threw the glass on the floor. Bile, blood, booze, and barf spilled onto the floorboards. The beast reached for her, stabbing her in the right side of her body. She didn't falter. She crawled over the counter, and even though the blood poured everywhere, she made it to the light of the other room. Before the beast grabbed her, she dove in. But unfortunately, now that Jesse was gone, the beast was hungry. Jensen screamed, "I heard a gunshot!" I had not heard a gunshot, but it was entirely possible that I was wrong, for the minute I looked at Jensen, I saw a black and red pool on his shirt begin to form. "I didn't cheat! I didn't cheat!" he cried. "I'm just lucky, is all." Unfortunately for Jensen, that was a lie. Luck was hardly his virtue. The beast dove onto him, devouring him whole in one swift motion before taking a seat next to me at the bar. James smiled. "Do you now understand your choice?" he asked me. My choice? I threw the beer at him and missed. It spilt foam and urine-colored liquid all over the wall. "What's wrong with you, James? You've changed." "I've never changed, Brian. I was always the same." Then I saw it. The glass Brian had been drinking was full of pills, multicolored pills of all sorts of kinds. With every sip he took, it was replenished by more and more pills. I began to understand, kind of. "Did you make your choice, Brian?" he asked me as black sludge poured from my dear old friend's mouth. "I don't know what choice is the right one yet, James." "Nobody does until it's too late," my dear old friend muttered for the last time as he fell dead to the floor. The monster then picked up his body and with a single bite devoured him whole. But then the beast poured me another beer. All this time I knew I hadn't felt a buzz. I'm not a heavy drinker, so the drinks I drank should have made me feel slightly intoxicated. But they didn't. I looked around the room and it was filled with blood spots and dead hair from the recently deceased. I looked down at the beer that the beast served me only to realize that it was filled with blood, and then I found that my mouth was filled with blood. I spat out massive clots of reddish goop from my lips and aimed the shotgun at the beast. "I choose to kill you." Then, boom. The first shell tore through its left shoulder. Black masses of pudding-like sludge flew off of it and onto the floor, only to regenerate back into a shoulder a few minutes later. The beast was untouched and unfazed. It smiled at me, and in the most guttural tones said, "You cannot defeat the inevitable." I sprinted for the door. I dove for the door. It was still locked, and the heavy footprints of the beast thudded behind me as I pulled against the pearl handles to the outside. The moans coming from the back of the room became stronger. I couldn't explain why, but I knew that it terrified me. In a weird and stupid game of cat and mouse, me and the beast tailed each other, running, dodging, and diving between cover. Its hideous breath began to fill the room, and the blood from my mouth seemed to grow stronger. It seemed as though if I stayed and fought the thing, that I'd either die from it, or from whatever supernatural being was causing me to bleed out. Without boring you with the details, I found myself behind the counter of the bar, next to James' spilled pile of pills. The door filled with light and horrifying moans was behind me, and the beast was in front of me, and blood covered me. I began to choke on it as my vision blurred. It pounced onto me, digging its feet into my abdomen, tearing it apart with its dull hooves. Its tentacles gripped at my throat and tore at my jugular until blood spewed everywhere. In a last-ditch effort, I spent the other barrel of the shotgun to blast the creature off me, sending it sky high. I knew it was only a matter of seconds before it regenerated, so in my last few moments before bleeding out, I followed Jesse's example and went into the light where the moans came from. "You nicked his artery!" I heard. "Stabilize! He's waking up!" I also heard. In the haze, I saw doctors with masks and tools. I felt immense pain in my abdomen and my neck. I woke up, finally. I was heavily sedated, but I knew where I was. I was in a hospital bed, surrounded by my wife and family. They were all there, asleep on the hospital chairs. I looked to the left of me, and there was Ahmed. It looked as though he had also gone through surgery. I went back to sleep. The drugs were too strong. 4 days later, I spoke with my doctor. He told me that Ahmed and I were in a massive wreck. A telephone pole split, gouged my stomach, and punctured Ahmed's lungs. In the surgery, I suffered a nick to the jugular that caused me to bleed out, but we were fine. And over time, we recovered. I left my job, and my family and I moved to the country to start a farm. Ahmed would sometimes call to check up on me, but it was normally just small talk. I was okay with that after all. We both survived something horrific. But one day he asked me something that made my blood curdle. Brian. Yes, Ahmed? Did you go inside the Twilight bar? I did. Did you see the light? I did. It was horrifying. Do you know what the Twilight bar is? I do now. Why didn't you go to the light right away? He asked me. I hesitated and didn't answer. Always, he said. What? Always go to the light. Always go to the light. With light, there is life.